Hey there, fellow ChessGoons. My name is Anthony Arena. I am a 2000 rated chess expert from Long Island, New York. And today in this video, we're going to go over the only 5 openings that you should be playing if you're a beginner. While there are 20 options, I'm going to make the argument today that 15 of them are bad for you and will actually lead to a losing position. Let's just get right into it. So the way I decide whether or not an opening is good is based on 3 criteria. Criteria 1, does the opening allow you to control the center? The center includes d4, e4, e5, and d5. Your ability to have influence over these 4 squares is very crucial in determining whether or not you should play that move or not. Secondly, I ask myself, how is the development? In particular, I want my knights in the center of the board. I want my bishops to exert pressure over my opponent's position as well. Finally, I ask myself, will this opening lead to my king's safety? Based on these 3 criteria, it's very easy to decide which openings we should use and which we shouldn't. We're going to start off with our F tier. These are the worst openings that you should definitely stay away from at all costs. There are a total of 7 openings in this tier, and it starts off with F3, the Barnes. And there are a bunch of different reasons why this is a bad move. For starters, notice we only control E4 after this move, and barely at that. There's no control over E5, D5, or D4. Our opponent will be able to strike in the center with either E5 or D5 and have a lot more control over the center. On top of that, our development is halted as well. Knight to f3 is not possible. This is usually where you want to put your knight. It's going to be very difficult to develop on the king side, which also causes 2 more problems. First off, this dark square diagonal is going to be a serious weakness. If our opponent plays e5, I would be very nervous of bishop e7 and then an attack on the dark square diagonal. On top of that, it's going to be much more difficult to castle because we're going to need to spend extra moves developing these 2 pieces here. Next up, we have A4 the Ware and H4 the Cassis. These openings are bad for the exact same reason. There's just no development. There's no control of the center, and it's also going to stop you from being able to castle your king quickly. Let's say you play H4, the Cassis. In this situation, you're not going to want to castle kingside, so imagine how long it's going to take you to try to castle long while developing your pieces, while trying to control the center after something like D5. It's fighting an uphill battle for no reason. Then we have B4 the Polish, and we also have G4 the Grob. Both of these openings are bad for exactly the same reason as well. Yes, you're allowing your bishops to develop to either G2 or B2, but you're creating a massive target on B4 and G4. Those pawns will eventually fall. Defending those pawns are very difficult. Let's say G4 and then pawn to E5, and then we go ahead and play F3. In this situation, we've actually been mated already, queen to H4. It's not better playing the Polish either. Let's say b4 and our opponent plays e5. Notice that our opponent has control of the center now, and on top of that, the bishop is discovering on b4. Try to defend this pawn, he's going to play d5 and have complete control of the center. Not only that, but we haven't developed any of our pieces, and our king is no closer to castling and getting into safety. And finally, guys, in our F tier, we have knight a3, the sodium attack, and knight h3, the Amar attack. And these ideas are really bad for the simple principle the knight on the rim is dim. Notice that knight on a3 has less control of the center. We haven't really developed any of our pieces. And after a move like e5, the bishop is eyeing down the knight. And if we try to control the center with e4, bishop takes, pawn takes. And I don't like this position at all for white. We're already losing and we have no attacks planned. Our king is not any closer to safety and we have no development. Moving to the C tier, these are moves that I don't consider to be necessarily the worst, but I don't think they're good either. They have lots of weaknesses despite doing 1 or 2 things correctly. Check out B3, the Larson attack, and G3, the King's Fianchetto. In this situation, we're clearly preparing a Fianchetto on B2 or a Fianchetto on G2. However, we could have played knight to F3 or knight to C3, and in those situations, we'd also be controlling the center while preparing the Fianchetto as well. So now in this situation, if let's say D5, knight to C3, looking to kettle the bishop, but then D4 push and our knight is misplaced. Still, the Larson and the King's Fianchetto do have some positives. You're going to be able to castle quite quickly with the King's Fianchetto after bishop G2 and knight F3. And overall, your development isn't completely awful because your bishop does have a really strong square it's going to go to, and you'll end up having control over the light squares or the dark squares, which at the very least gives you some sort of competitive advantage. Next up, we have A3 the Anderson and H3 the Clemens. These moves aren't nearly as bad as you would think. They're much better than h4 and a4 because at the very least, if you play a3 and let's say our opponent goes knight c6, notice that the knight's never going to be able to go to b4. Even though you're not controlling the center, you're not developing, and your king isn't any closer to castling, you are at the very least limiting your opponent's mobility. You're going for more of a defensive game. You're not in the best situation, but it's not the worst either. The same is true for h3 the Clemens. This is a high-class waiting move, and at the very least, you're not losing, but you're definitely not winning. And finally, for our C tier, c3, the Saragossa. Now, the Saragossa is bad for a couple of reasons. The main thing that I like is that your king isn't under duress right away. The queen can come out to a4 for some quick attacks, but notice you're not really helping your development. Knight c3 is not playable. You'll probably end up playing d4 and then knight d2 and then probably rerouting that knight to b3. But overall, you're not really doing anything good. You're not really doing anything bad. You kind of have control over d4, but d4 to start would have been a much stronger option, and you could have maybe played c4. Instead, we don't really have great development. We're not any closer to castling either. So yes, our king isn't under duress, but our king isn't even close to safety yet, and there will be an attack pending. Moving into our B tier, these are the moves that, in my opinion, are not that bad at all, but they're not great either. They lead to an even game where both sides have chances. For the English opening c4, what I like about this move is a lot of times this will actually transpose into a queen's gambit. Let's say d5 and then d4, and this is a queen's gambit position, just like you normally play. We'll be able to develop our knight to c3. We'll probably be able to kettle our bishop after g3, bishop g2, knight f3, castle short. It's not the end of the world. We do have some center control. We can develop our knight to c3. There are plans for our pieces, but we've also successfully given up white's advantage. Then we have d3, the Mises. I don't consider this to be bad. I don't consider this to be good. We have the dark square bishop on this diagonal here. Our light square bishop will play g2, and similar to the English, we'll play knight f3 and castle short. We're not really controlling the center. Our development isn't really hurt. We should be able to castle and have an okay game. But like I said, this ends up in an even position. We don't have that typical tempo advantage for white. Finally, guys, f4, the bird's opening. This to me is one of the most controversial openings in all of chess, but I personally like it. Can I recommend it? No. But you do have some ideas. The main threat that you have to watch out for here is the dark square diagonal. However, unlike in the Barnes, which was f3, our knight can go f3, and we'll be able to, at the very least, defend the dark squares. We're going to create an attack after maybe b3, bishop b2. We're going to castle short, and we're going to try to attack the king side. Our opponent will most likely castle. It's not the end of the world. I actually like the bird's opening. I'd almost consider it A tier, but it just doesn't quite make it because you do lose that tempo advantage, like the other two examples we talked about earlier. Finally, guys, these are the only 5 openings that you should play if you are a beginner. Starting off with number 5 on my list, the Van Kroots E3. We do take some control of the center. We're preparing a d4 push, but most importantly, our queen and bishop have rapid development, and we'll be able to attack some crucial squares, like perhaps f7, which is a big weakness for our opponents. On top of that, we can still develop our knights to f3 and c3. We're going to be able to castle very shortly. And in my opinion, this is a great opening. Number 4, we have knight c3. Notice that, yes, we're not pushing with the pawns to create control of the center, but our knight on c3 does control e4 as well as d5. This is a solid start. We will be able to push either d4 or e4 next. We're going to kill our bishop, go bishop b2. Now, maybe we'd be preparing for a queenside castle here, which isn't always my favorite for beginners. I would say that there are other options that are better, but this is a solid option. You do maintain your advantage, and you can create a very strong attack. Of course, at number 3, we have knight f3, the ready. And the ready is, in my opinion, one of the best top tier S+ openings that you can go for. We're going to immediately play g3, bishop g2, and we're going to castle short, and we're going to have a Catlin structure. We're going to look to attack this b7 square. We're going to castle extremely quickly. Our development and our control of the center are going to be very quick and rapid. This is, in my opinion, the 3rd best opening choice. At number 2, guys, the queen's pawn d4. This is my personal favorite opening, and what I really like about this is we immediately take control of the center. We're looking to develop rapidly. We're going to have a very strong position here. And in my opinion, these are some of the most fundamental structural lines that you'll find. If you're the type of player that likes to build structures and play positional strategic battles, this will be the opening for you. But at number one, and in my opinion, best by test, e4. E4 is amazing, fun, quick games. Notice the same advantages as e3. The bishop and queen can develop, but we also have center control. This opening really has it all. The main problem is there are so many different possibilities from e4, and there is a bit of memorization that comes with it, but you're going to have some very strong attacks. Your bishop will find c4. Your queen knights will develop very rapidly. You're still going to castle short, maybe even long, but the options are limitless, and this is definitely the best opening that you could possibly go for. Overall, guys, these are the 20 opening choices you have as white. I do highly recommend that you use the last 5, but let me know in the comment section if you use any of those openings that I don't recommend. If you like this video, I want to show you my personal favorite opening for black, the Carl Khan. Definitely check that out. Stay classy, my friends. Until next time.